The diplomatic vessel, Odyssey, gleamed against the backdrop of Celia's three moons, its polished hull reflecting the ambient light of the bustling spaceport below. Inside, the grand reception hall hummed with the measured conversation of a dozen species, each representative adorned in their cultural finery. Soft blue lighting accentuated the elegant curves of the room, designed specifically to be pleasing to all known sentient visual systems. Commander Elena Reyes surveyed the gathering with practiced calm, though her fingers occasionally tapped an anxious rhythm against her formal uniform. The Earth Alliance was making its first serious bid for inclusion in the Galactic Trade Accord, and tonight's reception for the Xilian delegation could tip the scales in humanity's favor, or doom them to another decade of economic isolation. "Carter," she said, beckoning a young officer who had been hovering near the entranceway. "Stop lurking and come here." Ethan Carter straightened his dress uniform and approached. At 28, he was the youngest communications officer aboard the Odyssey, known for his exceptional talent with languages and equally exceptional bad luck with diplomatic situations. His last posting had ended when he'd accidentally proposed marriage to a Viridian ambassador by offering her the wrong refreshment at the wrong time. "Ma'am," he said, saluting crisply. Commander Reyes sighed. "At ease before you sprain something. I need you to greet Deputy Ambassador Liara when she arrives. Basic welcome, nothing fancy, just the standard Xilian greeting. They value sincerity over complexity." Ethan nodded his mind, already racing through the formal Xilian phrases he'd studied. "Yes, Commander. I've been practicing the traditional welcome." "Good. Just keep it simple and—" Reyes paused, fixing him with a stern gaze. "For the love of Earth, don't try to impress anyone with extra phrases you've picked up. Stick to the script." "Absolutely, Commander. Simple. Script. Got it." As Commander Reyes moved away to attend to other guests, Ethan took a deep breath. This was his chance to redeem himself after the Viridian incident. He glanced around the room, noting the Gronak delegation in the corner, massive reptilian beings whose scales shifted colors with their emotions. Currently, they displayed a placid blue-green, indicating satisfaction with the food and drink. The doors at the far end of the hall slid open, and the Xilian delegation entered. Ambassador Thrall led the procession, his tall, slender form moving with practiced grace. Behind him came several advisors, and finally, Deputy Ambassador Liara. Ethan felt his breath catch. He'd seen images of Xilians before, but none had prepared him for Liara's presence. Her skin had the luminescent quality of fine jade with delicate patterns that shifted subtly in the light. Her hair, a silvery platinum that caught and reflected the ambient glow, was elaborately braided and adorned with small crystalline ornaments that tinkled softly as she moved. Most striking were her eyes, large almond-shaped and a deep violet that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. As she approached, Ethan noticed the fine sensory filaments that extended from her temples, what humans informally called mood whiskers, though he knew Xilians considered the term undignified. The filaments were currently relaxed, indicating openness and curiosity. Ethan stepped forward at Commander Reyes's subtle nod. He bowed in the Xilian manner from the waist hands, crossed at the chest. "Selamat Varin, esteemed Liara," he said in carefully practiced Xilian. "The stars shine brighter for your presence." Liara's whiskers trembled slightly. Amusement, Ethan hoped, as she returned the bow. "Your accent is quite good, Officer Carter," she replied, in perfect English. Few humans bother to learn our formal greeting. Encouraged by her response, Ethan felt a swell of confidence. The commander had said to keep it simple, but surely one additional phrase would demonstrate respect for Xilian culture. He'd overheard two Xilian merchants at the spaceport earlier, complimenting each other with what sounded like a particularly elegant phrase. As a server passed with a tray of delicacies, Liara selected what appeared to be a small, pulsating blue cube. She raised it to her lips, just as Ethan decided to deploy his linguistic surprise. "Kir nal sheveth, zar moreth, valkara," he said, smiling broadly, certain he was saying something like, "Your wisdom honors us." The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Liara's eyes widened to an impossible size. Her skin flushed from jade to a deep emerald. The sensory filaments at her temples stood rigid, then began to vibrate at such a high frequency they blurred. Most alarmingly, she appeared to inhale the blue cube whole and was now making a strangled, gasping sound. Ambassador Thrall whirled around his own whiskers, standing on end. "Noctival!" he exclaimed, rushing to Liara's side. Across the room, the Gronak delegation's scales rippled from blue-green to a pulsating orange-red, and several of them emitted what sounded suspiciously like laughter, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated the glassware on nearby tables. Commander Reyes appeared at Ethan's side, her expression a masterpiece of controlled fury. "What?" she hissed. "Did you just say to her?" The greeting," Ethan stammered. "And then a compliment I heard at the spaceport. Something about whiskers and galaxies." A Xilian medical officer had rushed to Liara's aid and was now administering some sort of spray to her throat. Her color gradually returned to normal, though her whiskers continued to tremble violently. Ambassador Thrall approached his posture rigid, with barely contained emotion. "Commander Reyes, your officer has just invoked the ancient Vexus ritual. He has declared in formal Xilian that, when you smile, your sensory tentacles shine like our galaxy's heart, a sacred proposition of biological compatibility and reproductive intent." The room had fallen silent. Even the Gronak delegation watched with rapt attention, their scales now pulsing with a curious purple hue. Commander Reyes closed her eyes briefly. "Ambassador Thrall, please accept our deepest apologies. Officer Carter had no understanding. Ignorance of cultural significance does not negate the ritual once invoked," Thrall interrupted. "Your officer has initiated 3 sacred obligations: personal atonement, the trial of worth, and the culmination. These cannot be undone without grave insult to our people." From the corner of his eye, Ethan saw Liara finally regaining her composure, though she refused to look in his direction. "What exactly do these obligations entail?" Commander Reyes asked, her voice tight. Elder Trath, the oldest and most respected of the Gronak delegation, stepped forward. His scales had settled into a deep, authoritative purple. "As witnesses to the invocation of Vexus Gronak tradition, demands we oversee the trial of worth." He rumbled his translator, struggling to convey the formal tones. "The human must prove his worthiness through challenge." "And the other parts?" Commander Reyes asked. Ambassador Thrall's whiskers twitched with what might have been discomfort. "Personal atonement requires private conversation between the invoker and the invoked. The culmination is a more intimate matter, typically resulting in pair bonding." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "Pair bonding, you mean?" "Marriage in your terms," Thrall said coldly. "Though the ritual allows for rejection, after the trial, should either party deem the other unworthy." Commander Reyes looked as though she might personally eject Ethan into space. "Ambassador, surely there's a diplomatic solution." "The Vexus ritual transcends diplomacy," Thrall said firmly. "It is the foundation of our cultural identity. To dismiss it would be to dismiss all possibility of alliance." Elder Trath nodded gravely, scales shifting to a solemn blue. "The Gronak concur. The ritual has been witnessed. It must be honored or rejected through proper channels." Commander Reyes' jaw worked silently for a moment before she turned to Ethan. "Officer Carter, you will comply with these cultural requirements and fix this diplomatic nightmare. Is that clear?" Ethan swallowed hard, looking across the room to where Liara stood now, composed but still visibly shaken. "Yes, Commander," he said weakly. "Crystal clear." Ethan spent a sleepless night researching everything in the ship's database about Xilian culture and the Vexus ritual. The information was frustratingly sparse. Xilians were notoriously private about their traditions, especially those concerning reproduction and pair bonding. He did learn that the ritual had originated thousands of years ago during the Great Zillion Diaspora, when genetic compatibility became crucial for the survival of colonies on foreign worlds. What began as a practical biological assessment had evolved into an elaborate cultural tradition, laden with symbolism and ceremony. The next morning, he received formal notification that Liara had agreed to meet him in the ship's biological library, a vast chamber filled with specimens and holographic displays of flora and fauna from 100 worlds. It was considered neutral territory, neither fully Earth nor Zillion space. Ethan arrived early, his stomach knotted with anxiety. He paced between displays of phosphorescent European jellyfish and towering Martian red ferns, rehearsing apologies in both English and Zillion. "Your pronunciation still needs work," came a voice from behind him. Ethan turned to find Liara standing beside a display of Zillion crystal orchids. She wore simpler attire today, a high-collared tunic in shimmering silver blue that complemented her jade skin. Her hair was bound in a single practical braid, and her whiskers were held close to her temples, indicating caution and reserve. "Deputy Ambassador," Ethan began bowing deeply. "I cannot adequately express my regret for yesterday's misunderstanding. I had no intention." "I know," she interrupted, her voice softer than he expected. "Ambassador Thrall explained that you overheard the phrase without context. It was unfortunate, but not malicious." Ethan straightened, surprised by her reasonableness. "Thank you for understanding. I would never deliberately cause such embarrassment." "The embarrassment was mutual, I assure you." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, and her whiskers relaxed slightly. "Do you know what makes the phrase so significant?" Ethan shook his head. "The database only mentions its connection to the Vexus ritual, not its specific meaning." Liara moved to a nearby bench and gestured for him to join her. When they were seated, she explained, "The phrase you used refers specifically to our sensory appendages, what you humans call whiskers, though they're actually specialized neural receptors capable of detecting electromagnetic fields and pheromones." "I had no idea," Ethan said, fascinated despite his embarrassment. "Few non-Zillions do. These receptors are most active during intimate moments." Her skin darkened slightly around her cheekbones. "The phrase essentially states that you find my neural receptors attractive and wish to see them fully activated in a reproductive context." Ethan covered his face with his hands. "Oh God, so I basically said—" "That you wish to mate with me and observe my physiological response, yes." There was a definite note of amusement in her voice now. "In public, at a diplomatic function, while comparing my potential orgasmic response to a galactic phenomenon." "I am so sorry," Ethan groaned through his fingers. To his surprise, Liara laughed, a lilting sound like wind chimes. "In a way, it's refreshing. Most diplomats are so careful around each other. There's something to be said for accidental honesty." Ethan lowered his hands, daring to meet her gaze. Her violet eyes held no anger, only a curious warmth. "So, what happens now with the ritual?" Liara's expression grew more serious. "The Vexus is no small matter. It originated in our pre-space era when finding compatible mates was essential for colony survival. It has 3 phases: declaration, which you inadvertently completed, demonstration, and culmination. And the demonstration is this trial of worth that the Gronak mentioned." She nodded. "The Gronak were once our greatest enemies, then our strongest allies. They oversee the trial to ensure that potential mates are worthy of continuing Zillion bloodlines. Traditionally, it involved combat, but it has evolved to test courage, intellect, and adaptability. What form will it take for me?" "Elder Trath will decide. It's usually tailored to the individual." She hesitated, then added, "And after that, should both parties wish to proceed, comes culmination." The way she said the word made it clear what it entailed. Ethan felt heat rise in his face. "And if either of us chooses not to proceed?" Then the ritual ends with no dishonor to either party. Her whiskers trembled slightly. But I should warn you, rejection after the trial is rare. The biological compatibility assessment is usually quite accurate. But we haven't had any assessment, Ethan pointed out, confused. Liara's skin darkened again. Actually, we have. My receptors analyzed your pheromonal signature when you approached. It's compatible. Highly so. Oh, Ethan wasn't sure how to process that information. And that's why you reacted so strongly. Partly. The combination of the ritual phrase unexpected compatibility and having food in my mouth created a perfect storm of embarrassment and biological response. She rose from the bench, signaling an end to their conversation. The trial is scheduled for tomorrow. Elder Trath requested access to your service record to design an appropriate challenge. Ethan stood as well. I'll be ready. Liara paused, studying him with those remarkable violet eyes. Officer Carter. Ethan, please. Ethan. She said his name carefully, as though testing the sound of it. Whatever happens tomorrow, I appreciate your willingness to respect our traditions, even when thrust upon you by accident. As she turned to leave, Ethan called after her. Deputy Ambassador Liara, may I ask a personal question? She paused, looking back over her shoulder. You may. If I hadn't said that phrase, if we'd met under normal circumstances, would you have been interested in getting to know me? For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then her whiskers fluttered in what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. I requested your personnel file when I learned you would be my liaison. Your linguistic skills are impressive. So yes, I was already interested. With that, she departed, leaving Ethan staring after her, with a mixture of dread and anticipation for tomorrow's trial. Elder Trath's scaled face revealed nothing as Ethan entered the Gronak vessel that had docked alongside the Odyssey. The ship's interior was hot and humid, designed to replicate the swamp-like conditions of the Gronak homeworld. Massive support columns resembled ancient trees, and the lighting had a greenish cast that made the metallic surfaces appear organic. Human Trath rumbled in greeting, not bothering with Ethan's name or rank. You have invoked Vexus with a zillion of high standing. You will now prove your worth. Behind the elder stood two younger Gronak, their scales a vibrant red-orange of youth and vigor. They regarded Ethan with what seemed like amused skepticism. I'm ready, Ethan said, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Are you? Trath tilted his massive head. We have examined your records. You were a pilot before becoming a communications officer. You navigated the asteroid fields of Europa with distinction. Ethan blinked in surprise. That was years ago, before a particularly harrowing near miss had left him with a lingering anxiety about spatial navigation. He'd transferred to communications shortly after burying himself in the safer world of languages and cultural exchange. That was a long time ago, he said carefully. Skills remain in the body's memory, Trath said. Your trial is simple. You will navigate your vessel through the veil of shattered stars. Ethan felt a chill, despite the humid environment. The veil was notorious, a dense field of metallic microasteroids that orbited Celia in an unpredictable pattern. The particles were too small to be detected by standard sensors, but large enough to tear through hull plating. Few pilots attempted passage, and fewer succeeded. The Odyssey is a diplomatic vessel, not a scout ship, Ethan protested. Commander Reyes would never. Your commander has approved the use of a shuttle, Trath interrupted. Modified with Gronak navigation systems, more sensitive to metallic bodies. The Zillion has requested to accompany you as observer. Liara, Ethan's surprise deepened. Why would she want to witness your worth, Trath said simply. Or your failure. One of the younger Gronak made a sound that the translator interpreted as a derisive snort. The human will turn back at the first sight of the veil. Their kind lacks the warrior spirit. Elder Trath silenced him with a glance. We shall see. He turned back to Ethan. Do you accept the trial? Ethan thought of the tight confines of a shuttle, the unpredictable danger of the veil, the gnawing fear that had driven him from the pilot's seat years ago. Then, he thought of Liara's violet eyes and her admission of interest in him, even before the accidental invocation of Vexus. "I accept," he said. The shuttle was smaller than Ethan expected, barely large enough for 2 humanoid passengers, plus navigational systems. Its exterior had been modified with what appeared to be Gronak sensory equipment, metallic protrusions, that presumably could detect the micro-asteroids of the veil. Liara was already inside when Ethan boarded seated in the observer's position, behind the pilot's chair. She wore a form-fitting flight suit of Zillion design, her silver platinum hair secured tightly against her head. Her whiskers extended fully quivering with what might have been excitement or apprehension. "I didn't expect you to join this crazy mission," Ethan said as he took the pilot's seat and began the pre-flight checks. His hands moved automatically through the sequence muscle memory, overriding his years away from flight control. "The Vexus ritual requires both parties to face risk," she replied. "It would be dishonorable to send you alone into the veil." Ethan glanced back at her. "But you're not piloting, you're just watching." "I am experiencing," she corrected. "My neural receptors will record your performance, your stress levels, decision-making patterns, physical responses. This data is crucial for compatibility assessment. So I'm being scanned while flying through a deadly asteroid field." Her whiskers twitched. "It is more intimate than a scan. I will experience your emotional state almost as my own. It is how we determine true compatibility beyond physical attraction." "No pressure," Ethan muttered, returning his attention to the controls. The modified Gronak sensors were displaying the space around Celia in a way he'd never seen before, not as empty vacuum with occasional solid objects, but as a complex tapestry of magnetic fields, radiation patterns, and molecular densities. Commander Rhea's voice came through the comm system. "Shuttle Hermes, you are cleared for departure. Officer Carter, try not to destroy one of our few remaining shuttles." "Understood, Commander," Ethan replied, easing the shuttle away from the Odyssey's docking bay. "We'll bring it back without a scratch." "See that you do, and Carter," her voice softened slightly, "good luck." The shuttle glided smoothly into open space, the bulk of the Odyssey falling away behind them. Ahead lay Celia, a gleaming blue-green jewel, orbited by its 3 moons, and between the second and third, barely visible as a shimmer against the stars, the veil of shattered stars. "The Gronak enhanced the sensors, but you'll still need to rely on instinct once we're inside," Liara said. "The particles move too quickly for even their technology to predict with certainty." Ethan nodded, focusing on the approach. As they drew closer, the shimmer resolved into a vast undulating cloud of metallic dust and fragments, some no larger than a grain of sand, others the size of a human fist. They reflected the light of Celia's sun, creating a dazzling, deadly curtain. "Why is this region so dangerous?" Ethan asked, partly to distract himself from the growing knot of anxiety in his stomach. "The veil formed after a great battle during the Zillion-Gronak War," Liara explained. "A Gronak fleet was ambushed by Zillion forces. Rather than surrender, the Gronak commander ordered his ships to self-destruct. The explosion was so violent it pulverized their hulls into the micro-asteroids you see now. And now the Gronak use it as a test of courage. Of respect," she corrected. "To navigate the veil is to honor those who died there, acknowledging that even enemies can become allies through mutual recognition of worth." They had reached the outer boundary of the veil. The Gronak sensors showed it as a swirling mass of red and orange against the deeper blue of space. Ethan's hands tightened on the controls. "Here we go," he murmured, more to himself than to Liara. The shuttle entered the veil, and immediately the sensors erupted with warnings. Tiny impacts pinged against the hull, harmless for now, but a reminder of the larger fragments waiting deeper inside. Ethan guided the shuttle in a series of gentle maneuvers, feeling his way through the patterns of debris. For a few minutes it went well. His old training reasserted itself, and he found a rhythm in the dance of avoidance. But as they penetrated further, the density of particles increased, and the patterns became more chaotic. A larger fragment appeared directly ahead. Ethan swerved hard to avoid it, only to face a cluster of smaller, but equally dangerous fragments. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he executed a complex roll-and-dive maneuver. "You're doing well," Liara said softly from behind him. "Not well enough," Ethan replied through gritted teeth. The anxiety he'd fought for years was rising, now a tide of panic threatening to overwhelm his concentration. His hands began to shake. Suddenly, he felt a touch on his shoulder. Liara had stretched forward from her seat to place her hand there. A strange calm flowed from the point of contact, like cool water over heated skin. "I feel your fear," she said. "It is not weakness to be afraid, Ethan. The Vexus values truth above all. Let me share this truth with you." Her neural receptors extended, brushing against the back of his neck. The sensation was electric, intimate, in a way he couldn't describe. He felt his consciousness expand, merging partially with hers. He sensed her own fear, not of the veil, but of the vulnerability of connection. He felt her curiosity about him, her admiration of his willingness to face this challenge, despite his anxiety. Most surprisingly, he felt her guiding him not with words, or even thoughts, but with a subtle intuition that complemented his own. Together, they anticipated the movements of the fragments, finding pathways where none seemed to exist. The shuttle danced through the densest part of the veil, grazing particles, but avoiding any damaging impacts. When they finally emerged on the other side, the stars seemed brighter somehow, the void of space more vibrant with possibility. Liara withdrew her touch, and Ethan felt the merging of consciousness recede, though something of the connection lingered, a ghost of understanding that hadn't existed before. "That was," he began, unable to find adequate words. "The beginning of Vexus bond," she said quietly. "A taste of what culmination offers." Ethan turned in his seat to look at her directly. Her skin glowed with exertion, and her whiskers quivered with what he now recognized as excitement and satisfaction. "We make a good team," he said. Her violet eyes met his unguarded for the first time since they'd met. "Yes," she agreed. "We do." Elder Trath was waiting when they returned to the Odyssey, his scaled hide now a deep, approving blue. "You have navigated the Veil with skill and honor," he announced formally. The Gronak witnessed the completion of the demonstration phase of Vexus. Commander Reyes stood beside him, her expression a complex mixture of relief and lingering concern. "Congratulations, Officer Carter. You've succeeded in not causing an interstellar incident. For now." Ethan and Liara exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them after their shared experience in the Veil. "What happens now?" Commander Reyes asked. "Now," Ambassador Thrall said, stepping forward from where he had been observing. "The involved parties must decide whether to proceed to culmination or to honorably withdraw from the ritual." All eyes turned to Ethan and Liara. "This decision need not be made immediately," Thrall continued. "Traditionally, a period of reflection follows the trial of worth." "How long?" Commander Reyes asked. "One cycle of Celia's primary moon," Thrall replied. "Approximately 3 of your Earth days." Ethan felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment at the delay. After the connection he'd experienced with Liara in the Veil, something in him was eager to explore further. Yet, the rational part of his mind recognized the enormity of what they were considering, a permanent bond with an alien whose culture and biology remained largely mysterious to him. 3 days is acceptable," he said formally. Liara nodded, her whiskers held close in a neutral position that revealed nothing of her thoughts. "I concur. We shall reflect and decide." As the gathering dispersed, Ethan caught Liara's eye once more. She gave him a small, private smile before following Ambassador Thrall, leaving Ethan to wonder what the coming days would bring. The reflection period passed in a blur of diplomatic meetings, as the trade negotiations between Earth Alliance, the Zillion Confederation, and various other galactic powers continued, despite the Vexus drama playing out in the background. Ethan and Liara saw each other only in passing, exchanging formal nods across crowded rooms, while their shared experience in the Vale hung between them unspoken but powerful. On the evening of the second day, an emergency alert sounded throughout the Odyssey. Commander Reyes summoned senior officers to the command center, including Ethan, whose linguistic skills might be needed. "We've detected a Dominion fleet entering the Celian system," Reyes announced grimly as they assembled. Long-range scans indicate at least 6 capital ships and supporting vessels. A murmur ran through the gathered officers. The Dominion was a militant collective of genetically enhanced humans who had broken away from Earth centuries ago, establishing their own aggressive empire on the far side of the galaxy. They considered standard humans genetic inferiors and had long opposed Earth's inclusion in galactic affairs. "Have they made any communications or demands?" Ethan asked. "Not yet," Reyes replied. "But their approach vector suggests they're heading directly for the negotiation zone. We've alerted all delegations." Within the hour, representatives from the major powers had assembled in the Odyssey's central conference chamber. Ambassador Thrall led the Zillion delegation, including Liara, whose whiskers were rigidly extended in what Ethan now recognized as high alert. Elder Trath represented the Gronak, his scales pulsing between anxious yellow and angry red. Commander Reyes addressed the gathering. "The Dominion fleet will reach Celia in approximately 18 hours. Their firepower exceeds the combined strength of all vessels currently in orbit. We must determine a unified response." "The Dominion's timing is suspicious," Ambassador Thrall observed. "They appear just as major trade negotiations near completion. They have always opposed cooperation between standard humans and other species," Elder Trath rumbled. "They believe their genetic enhancements make them the rightful inheritors of the galaxy." The discussion continued with various representatives, suggesting defensive strategies, diplomatic overtures, or immediate withdrawal from the system. None seemed satisfactory against the overwhelming force approaching. During a brief recess, Ethan found himself standing near a viewport alongside Liara, both gazing out at the stars that would soon bring danger. "Your whiskers have been in constant motion," he observed quietly. "What are you sensing that the rest of us can't?" She turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. "You've learned to read my receptors well." "I pay attention," he said simply. "I'm sensing patterns, connections." Her voice lowered. "The Dominion's arrival, the trade negotiations, the Vexus ritual between us, they're related somehow." "How could they be?" "The Vexus is more than a reproductive ritual. It's a binding of families, clans, worlds." Her violet eyes met his directly. "In ancient times it was used to seal alliances between warring factions. A biological guarantee of cooperation." Understanding dawned. "You think our accidental ritual could be used to formalize an alliance between humans and Zillions?" "And Gronak," she added. "They are witnesses and participants in the Vexus. A 3-species alliance would be unprecedented and powerful." Before Ethan could respond, Elder Trath approached his scales, now a contemplative deep blue. "You speak of what I have been considering," he said, his translator rendering his rumbling speech. "The Vexus between you could be elevated from personal to political significance." "Is that even possible?" Ethan asked. "I'm not a political representative, I'm just a communications officer." "In matters of Vexus, the individuals are secondary to the bond," Trath explained. "You would symbolize the alliance, become its living embodiment." Liara's whiskers trembled. "It would require immediate culmination, no reflection period." "And commitment to the bond," Trath added gravely. "Not just for diplomatic convenience, but as a permanent union." Ethan looked between them, the enormity of what they were suggesting settling over him. "You're talking about marriage. Actual permanent marriage, not just a political alliance." "The alliance cannot exist without the genuine bond," Liara confirmed softly. "That is the power of Vexus. It cannot be faked or manipulated. It must be real." "I need to think," Ethan said, stepping away from them both. His mind reeled with implications. What had begun as an accidental cultural faux pas had escalated into potential interstellar politics with his personal life, his very body and future, at the center. When the conference reconvened, Ambassador Thrall and Elder Trath requested to address the gathering. With formal gravity, they presented the possibility of a tripartite alliance sealed through the Vexus ritual between a human officer and a Xilian diplomat. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of responses. Some representatives expressed outrage at mixing personal relationships with politics. Others saw strategic value in the unprecedented alliance. Commander Reyes looked as though she couldn't decide whether to promote Ethan or court-martial him. "This is highly irregular," she said, when order was restored. "Officer Carter is not authorized to represent Earth Alliance in such a capacity." With respect, Commander Ambassador Thrall replied, "The Vexus transcends ordinary diplomatic authorization. It is a biological and spiritual commitment that once invoked has its own authority." "And the Gronak?" another Earth representative asked. "What do they gain from this arrangement?" Elder Trath's scales shifted to a formal purple hue. "The Gronak remember when we fought the Xilians before understanding united us. We remember when humans were newcomers to the stars, dismissed as primitives. Times change. Alliances evolve. The Dominion threatens all free species. United, we stand stronger." The debate continued for hours, even as reports confirmed the Dominion fleet maintained its course toward Celia. Finally, Earth Command transmitted authorization for the unprecedented alliance conditional upon the willing participation of both Ethan and Liara. After the formal session ended, Ethan and Liara retreated to the ship's botanical garden, a vast chamber designed to replicate multiple planetary ecosystems. They found a quiet spot among earth willows and Xilian crystal flowers, the hybrid environment seeming appropriate for their conversation. "So," Ethan said when they were seated on a bench overlooking a small stream, "we've gone from an accidental complement to potential saviors of 3 species in the span of a few days." Liara's whiskers twitched with what he now recognized as rueful humor. "The universe has strange paths for us all." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the play of light through the crystalline petals of the Xilian flowers. "If we do this," Ethan finally said, "it has to be for us, not just for politics. I won't enter a lifetime commitment as a diplomatic strategy." "Nor would I," Liara agreed. "The Vexus would fail if attempted without genuine connection. That's why it's respected as a binding force. It cannot be falsified." "What we experienced in the Veil," Ethan began, then hesitated, "was real," she finished for him. "A true compatibility. Rare even among Xilians, rarer still between species. But is compatibility enough for a lifetime commitment? We barely know each other." Liara turned to face him, fully, her violet eyes intent. "I have observed humans for many years, Ethan. Your species fascinates me. Your adaptability, your emotional capacity, your drive to connect despite differences. These are qualities I admire. And I've been drawn to you since we met," Ethan admitted. "Not just physically, though, there's that too. Your intelligence, your balance of tradition and flexibility. The way you handled my cultural blunder with grace." Her whiskers fluttered in what he now recognized as pleasure. "The question remains, is this enough to build upon? Or would we be sacrificing our personal happiness for political necessity?" Ethan considered this carefully. "If the Dominion weren't approaching, would you still consider culmination with me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "The trial confirmed what my receptors sensed from our first meeting. You are uniquely compatible with me. And you—" "I would want more time," he admitted honestly. "But not because I doubt the connection. I feel it too, something I can't fully explain. I grew up expecting a certain path in life. Marriage within my species. A traditional family. This is a significant deviation." "Then perhaps that is your answer," she said, a note of resignation entering her voice. Ethan reached out gently, touching one of her neural receptors. She shivered at the intimate contact, but didn't pull away. I said I would want more time. Not that I would choose differently with more time. Her eyes widened. You mean? I mean that sometimes the unexpected path is the right one. I'm drawn to you, Layara. Not as a diplomatic strategy, not as an alliance symbol, but as a person, a remarkable, fascinating person. I want to know better. He smiled. The fact that our personal choice might also save 3 species from the Dominion is just a bonus. Her whiskers extended fully, vibrating with emotion. You are certain. As certain as anyone can be about a lifetime commitment, he said wryly. Which is to say, terrified but confident anyway. She laughed, the musical sound he'd first heard in the biological library. A very human approach. I find it endearing. So, we're doing this culmination. We are, she confirmed, her expression growing more serious. But you should understand what it entails. The final phase of Vexus is both physical and psychic. Our minds will connect much more deeply than they did in the Veil. Our bodies will, well, Zillion and human anatomy is compatible, but there are differences you should be prepared for. Ethan felt a flush of heat at the implications. I'm a quick study, he said, attempting levity. Layara smiled, but continued solemnly. More importantly, the bond formed is permanent. Zillions mate for life with physiological changes that ensure continued compatibility. Physiological changes? Ethan asked, suddenly concerned. Nothing that would harm you, she assured him. But your neurochemistry will shift somewhat to maintain harmony with mine. You may experience enhanced empathic abilities, particularly with me, and you will be less compatible with potential human mates thereafter. Ethan took a deep breath. So I'm all in or not at all? Yes. This is why the reflection period is traditionally so important. He considered this final revelation, weighing it against what he'd already experienced with her. The connection in the Veil had been unlike anything he'd known before, a glimpse of a deeper understanding that transcended normal communication. The prospect of a lifetime of that connection was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'm still in, he said finally, all in. Her whiskers trembled with emotion as she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, a traditional Zillion gesture of acceptance and trust. Then, let us inform the Council. The culmination should occur before the Dominion arrives. The culmination ceremony was held in a private chamber aboard the Odyssey, specially prepared for the occasion. Zillion crystal flowers and earth roses intertwined along the walls, their scents mingling in the air. A circular platform in the center held a bed-like structure covered in iridescent fabric that seemed to shift colors with the lighting. Only the essential witnesses were present, Ambassador Thrall and Commander Reyes as representatives of their respective species, and Elder Trath as the Gronak observer. They stood at a respectful distance from the central platform, where Ethan and Liara would complete the ritual. Ethan wore a formal Earth Alliance uniform, specially modified with elements of Zillion design, silver threading, that caught the light in patterns reminiscent of Liara's neural receptors. Liara herself wore a ceremonial robe of shimmering material that seemed to flow like liquid around her form, emphasizing the graceful lines of her body, while maintaining the dignity appropriate to the occasion. Ambassador Thrall spoke first, his voice solemn. The Vexus ritual has guided our people since the days of the Great Diaspora. It has ensured genetic compatibility, emotional harmony, and cultural continuity. Today, it serves an additional purpose, binding not just 2 individuals, but 3 species in alliance against a common threat. Elder Trath stepped forward, his scales, now a ceremonial gold, rarely seen outside the most sacred Gronak rituals. The Gronak witness this union and pledge our strength to the alliance it creates. As these 2 become one, so do our peoples find unity in purpose and protection. Commander Reyes cleared her throat, somewhat less comfortable with the ceremonial aspects, but determined to represent Earth with dignity. The Earth Alliance recognizes the significance of this union and honors the commitment of Officer Ethan Carter, who serves beyond the call of duty in building bridges between our worlds. With the formal statements complete, the three witnesses retreated to the chamber's perimeter. A subtle change in lighting focused attention on the central platform, where Ethan and Liara now stood facing each other. "Are you ready?" Liara asked softly, her whiskers extended in anticipation. Ethan nodded, swallowing against a suddenly dry throat. "As ready as I'll ever be." She smiled and extended her hands, palms up. Ethan placed his hands on hers, feeling a subtle vibration between them, the beginning of the neurochemical connection the ritual would solidify. "The culmination has three aspects," Liara explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mind, body, and spirit. We begin with the mind." Her neural receptors extended fully, reaching toward him, like delicate silver antennae. As they touched his temples, Ethan gasped at the sudden rush of connection, far more intense than what they'd experienced in the Veil. He felt her consciousness flowing into his, and his into hers, creating an expanding spiral of shared perception. He saw glimpses of her childhood on the Zillion homeworld, crystalline cities, rising from verdant forests, the complex social structures of her family clan, her decision to pursue diplomatic service against the wishes of her more traditionally minded parents. He felt her loneliness among aliens, her fascination with other species, her particular interest in humans. In turn, he knew she was experiencing his memories, his upbringing in the rebuilt cities of post-war Earth, his early talent for languages, the deep space mission that had awakened his fear of navigation, his transfer to diplomatic service, and the series of minor cultural misunderstandings that had both humbled and educated him. Beyond mere memories they shared, emotions, sensations, the fundamental patterns of thought that made them who they were. It was overwhelming and intimate in a way Ethan had never imagined possible, yet somehow not invasive. There was a natural boundary to the sharing, a respectful acknowledgement of individual identity within the union. "Now the body," Liara whispered, drawing him down onto the platform. What followed was both familiar and utterly foreign, a physical communion that followed the universal patterns of intimacy while incorporating the unique aspects of their different biologies. Liara's skin emitted a subtle luminescence as they touched, and her neural receptors created points of electrical connection that sent cascades of pleasure through both their nervous systems. Ethan found himself instinctively understanding how to respond to her alien physiology, guided by the mental connection they now shared. His body seemed to know what pleased her, without conscious instruction, and she likewise responded to his needs with intuitive precision. As their physical communion intensified, the mental connection deepened, creating a feedback loop of shared sensation and emotion. Ethan lost track of where his body ended, and hers began where his thoughts separated from hers. They moved together in perfect synchronicity, building toward a simultaneous climax that transcended ordinary physical pleasure. "And finally, spirit," Liara gasped as they approached the peak. The final phase of culmination swept through them like a wave of light, connecting not just mind and body, but something deeper, what Zillions called Kareshva, and humans might name soul. In that moment of complete union, Ethan felt the permanent changes Liara had warned him about, subtle shifts in his neurochemistry, alterations in his perceptual framework, the formation of permanent pathways between his consciousness and hers. When awareness of individual identity returned, they lay entwined on the platform, still connected, but once again distinct beings. Ethan could feel a lingering presence of Liara in his mind, not intrusive, but like a warm light at the edge of his consciousness, a constant awareness of her existence and general emotional state. "It is done," Ambassador Thrall announced formally. "The Vexus is complete. The alliance is sealed." As they carefully disentangled and adjusted their ceremonial garments, Ethan found he could sense Liara's mixture of satisfaction, relief, and lingering pleasure without needing to see her face. When their eyes met, he knew she experienced the same awareness of him. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. Her whiskers fluttered in what he now recognized as contentment. Complete, she replied. And you? Like I've discovered a new sense I never knew was missing, he said honestly. It's extraordinary. Commander Reyes approached, maintaining a diplomatic straight face, despite the obvious awkwardness of having witnessed at least the outer manifestations of their intimate bond. Officer Carter, Ambassador Liara, I've just received word. The Dominion fleet has changed course. They're now on an intercept vector with the combined Zillion-Gronak forces gathering at the system's edge. The newly formed alliance was immediately put to the test. Within hours of the culmination ceremony, the Dominion fleet launched their attack, targeting the gathered vessels of Earth Alliance, Zillion Confederation, and Gronak Empire with overwhelming force. What they hadn't anticipated was the level of coordination the Vexus Alliance would enable. Through the bond established between Ethan and Liara, an unprecedented channel of communication opened between the three species. Tactical information flowed without the delays of translation or cultural misinterpretation. Zillion precision, Gronak power, and human adaptability combined in a defensive strategy that caught the Dominion completely by surprise. The battle raged for 3 days. Ethan and Liara remained aboard the Odyssey, serving as the living conduit of the Alliance. Their bond allowed them to perceive and relay information with extraordinary efficiency, guiding the combined fleet through a series of maneuvers that gradually turned the tide against the numerically superior Dominion forces. On the third day, the Dominion commander transmitted a request for ceasefire. The unprecedented alliance had accomplished what no single species could have done: force the militant collective to the negotiating table. In the aftermath, as the diplomatic corps took over the formal establishment of the alliance, Ethan and Liara found themselves with their first moment of privacy since the culmination. They stood together on the observation deck of the Odyssey, watching the distant lights of ships moving in the space around Celia. "So," Ethan said, slipping his arm around her waist, "what happens now to us, I mean?" Liara's whiskers fluttered with amusement. "Now comes the truly challenging part, building a life together. Any advice from ancient Zillion wisdom? Only that which applies across all species, patience, communication, and remembering why you chose each other in the first place." She leaned into his embrace. "Though in our case, communication should be easier than most." Ethan smiled, feeling the warm glow of her presence in his mind. "Where will we live, Earth your homeworld?" "Perhaps neither," she suggested. "The Alliance is establishing a new diplomatic outpost on Celia's largest moon. We would be symbolic representatives of what cooperation between species can achieve." "Ambassadors of Vexus," Ethan mused. "I like the sound of that." Liara's whiskers suddenly stilled, then began vibrating at a frequency he hadn't observed before. Through their bond, he sensed a mixture of surprise, joy, and trepidation. "What is it?" he asked, concerned. She placed her hand over her abdomen, her violet eyes wide. The culmination was particularly successful. Ethan stared at her, processing her meaning. "You mean, already is that even possible?" "Zillion reproduction is more efficient than human," she explained, a smile spreading across her face. "And the Vexus enhances compatibility at all levels. It would seem we are to be the parents of the first Zillion human child." "Is it? I mean, will it be healthy? Our biologies are so different." "The Vexus ensures genetic harmony," she assured him. "Our child will carry attributes of both species in a viable form. They will be unique, a living embodiment of the Alliance." Ethan felt a dizzying mixture of terror and elation. Parenthood was daunting enough within one's own species. Cross-species parenthood was unprecedented territory. Yet, as he stood there with Liara, feeling their shared consciousness hum with mutual emotion, he found himself embracing the unknown. Their entire relationship had been one unexpected turn after another, beginning with a misunderstood compliment about whiskers and galaxies. Why should their journey into parenthood be any different? "A family of firsts," he said, placing his hand over hers. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "When our child is old enough to start dating, you're handling the cultural briefing." I've caused enough interstellar incidents for one lifetime. Liara laughed, the sound like crystal chimes in the quiet observation deck. Agreed, though I suspect our child will navigate between worlds more naturally than either of us. As they stood together watching the stars, Ethan reflected on the strange path that had brought him here, from an embarrassing diplomatic blunder to the center of a historic alliance, from isolated individual to one half of a unique bond that transcended species. It wasn't the life he had imagined for himself, but as Liara's consciousness brushed warmly against his, he knew with absolute certainty that it was the life he was meant to find. In the vast complexity of the universe, sometimes the most profound connections began with a simple misunderstanding. And sometimes what appeared to be a mortifying error turned out to be the first step towards something extraordinary, a truth as ancient as the stars and as universal as the galactic light that illuminated their shared future.